So good afternoon and welcome to this Governors for Schools webinar. Today we're pleased to be joined by Nicole Rodden, who is going to host a session for us on inclusion and the role of the governor. Before I hand over, can I ask everyone to confirm that they can hear by selecting the raise hand icon on your webinar panels? Great, lots of hands have gone up, so I think that means you can all hear. Just a reminder that you can download the slides for this webinar from the panel on your screen, and they'll also be available on our website from tomorrow, along with the recording of today's session. Nicole will be taking sessions at the end of the webinar, so please do send in any that you have using the Enter a Question for Staff field on your panel on the screen. And so with that, we're ready to get going.
Thank you, Ollie. Hello, everybody. As Ollie said, my name is Nicole, and welcome to part 1 of 2 of Inclusion and the Role of the Governor. So please feel free to put questions out there, and as Ollie said, I will answer them at the end of the webinar. So just a little bit about me. My name is Nicole Rodden, and I'm the founder of an organisation called Same Difference. And I've recently completed my Masters at the Institute of Education, focusing on educational leadership and specifically looking at female leadership and looking at deputy heads getting into headship. My email address is on the bottom. If you do have follow-up questions, please feel free to get in touch. So the aims of today's webinar are to understand why inclusion is important as a governor, to know how inclusion affects 3 specific topics, so looking at parental engagement, curriculum, and the recruitment and retention of staff, and to know practical strategies to improve inclusion as a governor. So hopefully by the end of today, you'll walk out, you'll carry on your day with practical strategies that you can use in your next governor meeting. So I'd like to launch the first poll, which is really what brought you to the webinar today? So was it a general interest in the topic, a specific equalities issue, and are you new to being governor? Would you like some refresher training, or are you completely new to the topic, or is there other? So please, I can see you're already posting your answers, so that's great. And we're up to about 80%, which is brilliant. And just waiting for the last few. And that's great. So I'd like to share those results with you. So that is, it's clear that most of you have a general interest in the topic or are a newly appointed governor. So thank you for that. And if you have another questions which I might be able to hopefully be able to answer today, and if not, I'll be able to answer in the next session on Tuesday the 15th. Okay, so getting back to the presentation. So firstly, looking at what is inclusion. So just give you a minute to have a look at the definition on the screen. So what we can see here is that inclusion really is this basic right of everyone. And as governors, we have a responsibility to look at pupils, but also to look at staff. And the objective is really to embrace everyone, regardless of race, age, gender, disability, religious and cultural beliefs, and sexual orientation. And what I've seen is that schools who are really considering inclusion not only remove barriers for discrimination, but they actively promote a sense of belonging and creating a really inclusive environment. So, looking at why it's important that school governors prioritise equality and inclusion. So, looking at our statistics in terms of the pupils, we know that in terms of exclusions, Black Caribbean pupils are 3 times more likely than white British pupils to be excluded. And Gypsy, Roma and Traveller pupils have the highest rate of exclusions. Similarly, with pupils with special educational needs, in 2016 to 2017, they were 5 times more likely to be excluded than non-SEN pupils. So, and of course, with Ofsted's equality, the Equality Act is the law that we make sure that we've protected our pupils, especially those with those protected characteristics, which I will put up for you now. So, Ofsted show that it's unlawful for a school to discriminate against a pupil or a prospective pupil by treating them less favourably because of this list. So, because of their sex, their race, their disability. And it's really up to us as governors to ensure that all pupils, that we actively promote inclusion. Also looking at our staff. So across the country, only 3% of the largest academy trusts in the country are led by people of colour. Yet a third of our pupils are from ethnic minority backgrounds. So are we representative of our pupil body? And if not, then what are the potential problems with that? Also, just taking a quote from a Black female head teacher who said they would bypass me and ask other members of the senior team questions regarding my area of responsibility. So there's sort of a lack of trust there. And over 3/4 of LGBT teachers aren't out at school. And what message is that sending to the pupils who are part of the LGBT community? And finally, looking at, I mean, these are some of the statistics out there, but from my research as well, looking at female head teachers make up 37%, yet the majority of teachers are female. So again, what does that say in terms of hierarchy? So that brings me on to our first topic, which is the recruitment and retention of staff. Why is this important? We all want to be able to retain the best staff. We want to retain the best headship, and we want to progress them on to leadership positions. But it's also really important that our staff body is representative of our pupil body. However, we face difficulties. So there's difficulties to recruit and retain in the current climate, but also there's a limited budget in terms of advertising, and it's difficult to get the people with the right skills for the role. So this is a specific equalities issue because we want our staff to feel part of a community and a sense of belonging. So what can we do about it? In terms of retention, we as governors need to understand what our staff body looks like. And that's in terms of ethnicity and gender, as much information as possible to understand the whole teaching body. And that comes from the people who are on the senior leadership team, the teachers, but also down to the teaching staff, the teaching assistants. We also need to be thinking about how are we retaining that talent, and how are we pushing and encouraging our teachers to progress to leadership positions. So having those conversations with your senior leadership team about our line managers actually putting those learning opportunities in place. This also leads me into the third bullet point, which is about our stereotypes and our own stereotypes of the word leader. So from the research that I've done talking to deputy head teachers, actually some of them didn't fall into the category of what we might think of a leader, these words like charismatic or extroverted. And actually, by being introverted, they were able to be encouraged into leadership positions and to become head teachers by the power of mentorship, which is really, really key, really important. So looking at your senior leadership team and looking at the strategies that they're putting in place. The second point, just to go back to, is that shockingly, the education sector is the third worst sector for the gender pay gap. It's actually worse than mining, which, if we think about it, we need to make sure that it's equality across the board. And as governors, do you know your gender pay gap? And what strategies have you put in place in order to remove that gap and to close that gap? Similarly with recruitment, when we're looking at our job advertisements, is the language inclusive? So research has shown that language such as gravitas, and I will talk more in depth about the power of language in the next webinar, but the power of language and the words such as gravitas is actually a very gendered term, and it's seen to put women off from applying as it's quite a masculine word. So there are tools that I can show you that will actually help to go through those job advertisements to check that you aren't using that gendered language. Also, statistics show that women apply for a job only if they meet 100% of the criteria, which means that could potentially put some women off applying, whereas men are more likely to apply if they meet between 75 to 100%, to 50%. Also, where are you posting the advertisement? And who are you reaching by this? So trying to think of creative ways in which to harness other online mediums or local community mediums in order to gain a wider range of people seeing that advertisement. And then on terms of recruitment policies, looking at every stage of the recruitment procedure and especially the interview. So lots of questions come up which some women would find very offensive. For example, are you planning on having children? And some women who I interviewed had specific race issues during and faced racism during the interview process. So is the interview board representative? And how can you reduce bias in terms of the recruitment process? So moving on to, actually also one more point on that is that within the interview process, there's a bias which we find that we like to have something in common with people. So instantly, if there is somebody who we see a connection with, we're more likely to want to hire them. But we know that a diverse range of people from lots of different backgrounds and walks of life mean that we can spot challenges that one homogenous group wouldn't spot. So we really need to work out ways to critically question ourselves, to be thinking, who are we hiring and where from? Okay, so I'm going to launch the second poll, which is I want you to just reflect on your governing body and to think about how well does your governing body represent the student population. So thinking about, is it equally representative? Is it somewhat representative? Is it not? Or are you unsure? So the results coming in really quickly there, so thank you very much. And this can be in terms of gender, mixture of age, race, ethnicity, ability and disability. We're getting up to 90% of the votes there, so just waiting for the last few. And excellent. So I've shared the results with you there, so you can see that actually it's somewhat representative, which is great, and we know that, and I'll talk a bit more about the challenges that we probably have faced, but that is great that actually it's somewhat representative, but it also means that potentially we can think as governors how to get it to, yes, equally representative, and what strides can we make. And if you're unsure about this, thinking about, or if it's not representative at all, thinking about what strategies could you put in place in order to reach out to those communities who you might not exactly be serving from your governing board. And that brings me on to our next topic, which is looking at parental engagement. And I'm going to look at this from looking at the governing board, but also looking at, in more general terms, at general parent engagement. So why is this important? Well, we all know the importance of getting parents on board to support their child's education. Yet often some of those parents who we want to reach out to can be less engaged, and I'll talk a little bit more about some of the reasons for that. So what are the difficulties? Well, actually, it can be difficult to recruit parent governors from different backgrounds, but also parents can feel that they wouldn't be well equipped to handle the role of a governor, wouldn't necessarily know what they would bring or be able to advise. So it's a confidence issue there. So what can we do about it? In terms of parent governors, often fitting in and I'm sure we all find this tricky to an extent, but definitely in terms of parents and fitting in the governor meetings and conversations around, for example, if you're a single parent, around the schedule. So finding alternative and creative ways to do that, such as Skyping in, and this doesn't have to be every time, it can be once in a while. But also looking at the governor roles and whether they could be shared for a co-parent governor role, which would mean they would be able to support each other. But also looking at I've seen some excellent examples of buddying opportunities where parent governors have been able to speak to more experienced governors and really ask those questions that they might be a little bit afraid or unsure to ask in the meetings. Similarly, with parent governors, just to be thinking about which communities are you serving, is the governing board serving, and also which communities are they coming from, and how can we be representative? And that kind of leads me into the next point about engaging parents, and that's about us as governors. Do we have that connection to the different communities that we serve, and how can we improve our knowledge of those communities? So community walks are an excellent way of exploring some of the communities that you might not be as familiar with, and trying to involve yourself in the community as much as possible to understand what are the key challenges and problems that they may face. Also, one way, going back to our problem of engaging with parents, is that often if parents have had negative meetings with the school in terms of their pupils and behaviour, they're constantly coming into the school, but it's on not necessarily the most positive topics, parents can sometimes feel that that is the relationship. And so we want to create positive parental engagement. So having things which I've seen done really excellently, half an hour of information mornings on a particular topic, or a tea and cake morning. But also some parents feel as if the school are well equipped and know how to educate their children, and can often feel less confident about supporting that. So it's not necessarily that they are actively not reaching out to the school, but really that they think the school can handle the education side. And so holding things such as maths and English classes to improve the actual skills of the parents so that they're better equipped to be able to support their child at home. Also on that point is about language barriers and being able to have people from the community in order to translate, to feel, so that the parents feel really included. And one particular case study from a head teacher is that she wanted to see who she was talking to and how they were talking to her, and how she was communicating with them. So she actually, and I'll show you just a sample of what she did, created a spreadsheet for who the parent was, what background they were from, whether they had regular contact, and what type of contact was that. Was it face-to-face? Was it on the phone? Was it through emails? And actually, what do they call her? What do those parents call her? And in this particular case, it came out that a head teacher, and as governors, we can do this, but we can also ask our head teacher and teaching bodies to have a look at this, to see that there was this whole group, a whole community that she wasn't actually communicating with. And what impact does that have then on those pupil outcomes? So moving on to our third topic, and this is all about the curriculum. How do we make our curriculum inclusive? So why is this important? Ofsted require a rich curriculum that meets the needs of all pupils. And I know that there's been other webinars specifically to do with curriculum and what that rich curriculum means. But we need to be thinking about the whole character, a character education of the child. And we need to be teaching our pupils to think critically and to think collaboratively for our 21st century skills. And especially for those pupils who, for example, if you're teaching and the majority of the pupils are white British, for example, they're then going to go out into the workplace. They need to be equipped with the knowledge and the skills to work with people from a whole range of backgrounds. And they will be at a disadvantage if they haven't been exposed to that. And the curriculum is an amazing way to do that. Yet we do face challenges. Budget cuts to the curriculum, and there's a huge emphasis on these core subjects, which find that actually many schools are removing arts-based subjects from their curriculum and replacing them with maths and English. And this can be around SATs time, year 5 and 6, and also at the end of secondary school. And we really need to think, how can we think creatively? How can we think about, are we meeting the needs of all pupils if we are only teaching those core subjects? And Ofsted will specifically be looking at this. So that brings me on to role models, and really it's the same in terms of staff as pupils, that if you can't see it, you can't be it. And role models are a hugely powerful tool for improving motivation, improving academic attainment, and we want to be creating that within our curriculum, showing pupils role models from a whole range of backgrounds and abilities. And so the first point about what we can do about it, we need to be looking at who is taking which subjects and how are we encouraging our pupils to think about a range of subjects. So I just want to show you this poster created from an organisation called Nevertheless. Role models to put around the school is STEM role models are really important, and these come in a range of languages. So we need to be thinking not just about what we're teaching in the national curriculum, which I will talk about, but also what's going up around the school. What are the pupils seeing? Another point is that as a governor, we have wide networks, and one of the key things in terms of inclusion is that work experience point. And how can we use our networks to really help those pupils who don't have those opportunities and don't have those contacts to seek a variety of work experiences? Also using other times, not just the main curriculum, in order to discuss key issues and to learn about people from different backgrounds. So using PSHE, talking about politics in form time, getting individual groups of students to feed back and teach others about their communities and their cultural backgrounds. And one thing specifically to do with the actual curriculum is how are we ensuring that the people that we teach, this goes back to my first point on who's taking which subjects, but also in subjects such as maths and English, but also history, music, religious studies, are we using a range of role models and of people to study that are diverse? And I think that's really important, that often white men are the ones who we do talk about, and it's really important, especially in subjects like music, where it can be done in amazing ways, and history, that a whole range of people are being celebrated. So looking at the extracurricular activities, we need to know who is taking part in these extracurricular activities, what is on offer, and who is not taking part and why. And as governors, we need to really understand what are those barriers. Is it the fact that it's at a non-convenient time for the parents to pick them up, or there's other responsibilities that they have? But we know that it's not just the curriculum that is going to make the entire child, and that's in school. It's also all of those extracurricular activities. So looking at surveying, and I've seen a school do this brilliantly, where they actually got the pupils to collect survey data, and they interviewed other pupils to really understand what was on offer and what could be improved. And similarly with trips, it's really difficult to know exactly who is going on trips, and that is from which backgrounds are going on trips and which abilities. And we know that the importance of trips. So for a whole range, the cultural capital is brilliant for improving our people's cultural capital. So asking your senior leadership teams to ask the teachers, the form tutors, to really understand who's been on trips, and also, if they are running trips, is there equal representation in terms of the communities that you've got at your school, in terms of different abilities, special educational needs, and to really understand that picture. So I also wanted to show you an example of a specifically inclusive day, which a school has done. One case study has done brilliantly, where the student council actually arranged a Celebrating Cultures Day. And this was where students brought in food, they played music, they did traditional dance, and if you're in a school which is sort of a homogenous group, how can you then ask pupils to understand and learn about other communities? And also looking at on the point of trips. So when you're planning your trips, this is just a helpful tool for the whole year. We need to make sure that all our pupils can attend the trip. the trips that we put on. So looking at religious holidays, looking at also those days. For example, on here we had like Chinese New Year, and being able to, and I know that some schools do this brilliantly, they're able to really World Poetry Day and to really be able to celebrate inclusion and celebrate this diversity. Okay, so what I would like you to do is we've obviously discussed lots of different strategies, but in order to kind of capture those, I would like you to write down one short-term goal and one long-term goal that you are able to implement as a governor to improve inclusion. And I'll just give you an example there. One second, I'll just pull that up. Just bear with me. So a short-term goal is, for example, sending an email to contacts to inquire about work experience placements, or to add inclusion to an existing staff survey on wellbeing. And a long-term goal might be to assess your curriculum strategy and make the changes that you need to ensure that all pupils' needs are met. And when you've done that, if you could just put up your hand to show that you have this one short-term and one long-term goal, that would be brilliant. That just tells me that those have been implemented. So thank you very much. See those hands coming in. Okay, excellent. Okay, brilliant. So that leads me on to take some questions. So I already see some brilliant questions have come through, and I'll have a look at the questions, and some of them are comments. So thank you very much for this, and feel free to send me some comments. So one question. One question that's come through is about what is STEM. So STEM is really the science subject. So it's science, technology, engineering and maths. So it's really about those topics and those subjects that are currently less taken up by girls and more taken up by boys. And the Institute of Physics are doing some brilliant work to get more girls into STEM subjects, so science subjects and maths. So thank you for that clarification question. So now looking at so a really good question. Why do governors need to know who is accessing trips and extracurricular activities? So you might be asked that it's not you might be told that it's sort of not in your remit. So what I would say, and I think it's a brilliant question, is that specifically to do with the child as a whole and creating a character education that Ofsted are going to be specifically looking at. As governors, we must know that our pupils are accessing a whole range of topics and a whole range of skills that are not found just within the teaching curriculum. And we know that actually as governors, one of our main duties is to be able to know where that's coming from, and trips and extracurricular activities are a really kind of nice way and an easy way to to be able to say, you know, all of our pupils are taking part in, or you know, the majority of our pupils are taking part in extracurricular activities, so they are developing those teamwork skills, for example, that they are developing those critical thinking skills in a debating club, that they're working with pupils not just within their class, maybe within the whole school, so working with different age groups. And it is really important for governors to know that. So I hope I've answered your question there. So we've had a few comments in about not really sure what to put as my goals yet, and that's absolutely fine. So what I would say is to really just to go away and have a think about it, and think about taking one particular area. Maybe it's the recruitment and retention of staff, or maybe it's the curriculum or parental engagement, and to be thinking about how can you best to a short-term goal and a long-term goal in order to move that closer to inclusion. So that's absolutely fine to have a think about it. So more comments have come in. And I'm just having a read of the questions. So some a question here about not being some extracurricular activities not being offered to them, and that are of interest to him. I see. So that, yeah, so a comment there about that the extracurricular activities aren't actually of interest, and that is something that it's really tricky to be able to find all of those extracurricular activities to suit some people's needs. But what I would say is to actually go back to the school and to really, yeah, be asking the pupils in the student council, or to get them to do a survey on what does interest them, and what, you know, whether it's a technology club, or whether it's a coding clubs and things, that will be able to either put on by somebody in the school, but also if you need that outside external support, that then the school can go and look for that. But to actually have it to come from the pupils, to work out what the pupils are interested in, and then look at what the teaching staff can deliver, to find alternative ways of really engaging all pupils. So I've had a comment there about pupils with physical disabilities are often excluded from activities or trips, and even a certain area for the school for a number of reasons. And yeah, I would completely agree with this, that is the case, really sadly. This group rarely gets mentioned, and there needs to be a significant awareness raising programme. And yeah, I completely agree with that comment, that we really do need to find, so looking at those trips and having it on the top of the agenda. So as governors, we need to make sure that our schools are thinking about that in terms of the playground, in terms of from the point of view of that pupil. So thank you for raising that comment. Just reading through the next question. I'm a governor at a school in a deprived area. The school, alongside the governing body, struggle to engage parents. The governing body is not representative of the community, but having had vacancies for parent governors for a while, how would you suggest to fill these, particularly with diverse from diverse backgrounds with ethnicity, social mobility? What would be your suggestion to fill these out? So yeah, really good question there, and thank you for posing that. I'd say thinking about those communities and where they meet and where they and also who they trust, to be able to find areas where you can reach them, but also making the role accessible. So providing information about the role, and when the parents are already in school. So for example, at parents' evening, there might be some information about being a parent governor would give to that person, and trying to reach out to those communities. So yeah, looking at where they are meeting, and who they trust, and what leaders they trust, but also at times where they are coming to the school, how can you engage with those parents and what information can you give? So I hope that's been helpful. Just looking at so looking at the recruitment and interview procedures, I think there's a comment here that procedures must also include an opportunity to observe candidates in a classroom with pupils in order to assess the quality of the interactions to see if they are being inclusive. Yes, definitely, and also, I really like that point. And I've heard of some pupils interviewing the head teachers, and that has worked brilliantly. So thank you for that comment there. Okay, so that brings me to the end of the webinar, and thank you so much for those questions. I mean, feel free to put a question out there, and I am also running another webinar in 2 weeks' time, on Tuesday the 15th of October, and if there's anything that really hasn't been mentioned in there, that one will be on more looking at behaviour and rewards, so looking at those policies, specifically looking at pupil achievement, and focusing on language and the language that we're using as governors. If you would like to have some resources that I have to send to you, please do tick on the survey, the survey at the end. Please do tick that you're happy for me to contact you, and that will I'll be able to then send you the spreadsheets and the resources that I have to hand. So thank you very much for your interaction and for your comments and questions. And I'll now hand over back to Ollie.
So thank you, Nicole, and thanks everyone for joining. Yeah, just a reminder that the second webinar will be on Tuesday the 15th at 12:30. That was originally down for Thursday the 17th, but we've had to reschedule that, I'm afraid. So hopefully you can still make that date. This webinar will be available to watch back and share on our website from tomorrow, and you'll be able to download the slides. But thanks again, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your days. So thank you very much.